Good morning.
Good
We are
morning.
here once again in this incredible session. I was thinking to myself this morning, how generous of you, Jesse, all the incredible knowledge and nuggets and just expertise you've been dropping on this series so far. Um, it's not lost on me that there is a decision to be made, hand it all over, and or, and I love that you're one of those hand it all over type of guys. So thank you for
Yeah,
that generosity.
yeah, it's no, I enjoy doing it. I'm a teacher first and foremost, so as long as I can do that and stay a little bit profitable, I'm happy to do that. So we were actually chatting in the green room before this about how I think this is where the industry is headed, right? So I was, keeping my finger on the pulse as we all do, I think, in this MSP community, right? And just thinking about all the different communities, things like the power grid that are springing up, where we're coming together in like kind of a collective sharing environment to say, hey, here's what I'm doing, here's what's working. I mean, I think like the Evolve peer groups were the predecessor of a lot of that, right? But even the amount of communities that are actually able to be sustainable in the MSP industry is really exciting for me, because it shows that the shift has come from like a, keep it close to the chest, cutthroat, win or lose, kill or be killed environment into a more growth mindset, meaning that, hey, there's enough work to go around, and we all know there's plenty of work to go around. And if we help each other, we're actually going to collectively get better. So I thought that was an interesting thing now that we're coming in today, and to have you say that. So very, very timely.
Yeah. Well, and it's maybe also a root of a challenge that exists, which is lack of focus, lack of execution. Like we've always kind of come around to this topic over the weeks and months that the thing that differentiates an MSP that's doing really well, somebody who's launching their vCISO program really well, is often just focus and execution
Yeah.
on the task at hand.
Yeah.
And although I love that there's all these communities springing up, it's a challenge sometimes because like the FOMO factor is real. Everybody wants to be in all the communities,
Yeah.
and it's a big distraction. I wonder sometimes when I see the chats going on throughout the day in some of these signal groups or whatever, how anybody is getting anything done.
Yeah. You, you're so wow. It's like we're reading each other's minds here. We did not plan this, folks, but it's funny that you say that, because when I had that thought, and I keep a little mental file, a swipe file, some call it, of like ideas to talk about, right? And then I immediately wrote after that, like, I need to do a poll on LinkedIn to say, like, how are people choosing what communities to be in? Because that was my
All right.
exact next thought. It's like, how many of these communities can you really be in and stay focused on actually executing? So you got to kind of pick your lane and pick what you're going to do. And so I think that all stems back to like having a good organizational growth plan and goal setting. But I would be interested to hear, what people think and how they're making those decisions. I know how I would do it, right? But interesting to hear what the industry is doing.
Yeah. Cell phone into airplane mode and
Yeah.
work on your vCISO program, which
That's
is
right.
what we're here today to do. And
Yeah.
so let's get right into it. Jesse Miller joining us again, session 5 of 6. So the next one will be in early December. We'll have a QR code for that. As far as the previous ones, you can go grab all the resources for the previous sessions at this link here. And I'll throw the actual link in the chat as well. So everybody has it. And there's the previous sessions have resources, have templates, have downloads, and oftentimes we've referred to previous session resources in one of the future sessions. So as you see those, just know that all the resources you can go grab from this link of all the previous sessions. Now in session 4, just a few weeks ago, we did a really interesting conversation around this dress for success framework, and we talked about all this kind of process driven stuff that's required to be in place before you really go sell, onboard, and deliver. I thought that was a great session. Kind of gives you a pretty good understanding of what you need in place before attempting the go live, of course. Anything else to say, Jesse, on session 4?
No, I think you hit it on the head. And by the way, we will be referring back heavily to session 4 in today's session, because what I would say is session 4 was like the playbook in the pregame, right? And
Yeah.
today we're going to be actually executing the plays, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to be less template process driven and more, nimble? How are we actually handling the situations we come across? So I think today is going to be more just talking situationally and strategically. Whereas contrast that with last week, it was very scholastic and theoretical.
Yeah. Good stuff. So speaking of today, the agenda really today is this iterate and launch component of the development roadmap. And so we're talking about cross-functional prep. I think something that sometimes MSPs do is they kind of hand the gig to one person to go figure out how to launch, right? And there's always cross-functional stuff that needs to be figured out, support other stuff from the teams, and just readiness across sales, marketing, delivery, onboarding, et cetera. And so I think that's an important piece to talk about a little bit more today.
Yeah.
The maybe the realism around which clients are actually an ideal place to start. And so spending a little bit more time in that client identification stage and setting some realistic time-bound goals for those is the second part of that. And then the ever important feedback loop of anything new that you do is to not make assumptions about how you're doing, how this is going, but actually set up some proper feedback loops. As the people in the Air Force would go, rankless debriefs, right? Give people the power to come in and give their opinion to make the situation better without fear of repercussion due to rank. Yeah. I can't remember.
Skip level meetings.
Yeah,
if you're talking to corporate parlance.
I think it was some IT Nation Connect conference where they had like some folks from the Air Force come in and do a talk, and they spoke about this particular rankless meeting debrief, which I think was a really cool thing. Yeah, so that's iterate and launch, and then session 6 will coming up in December will be that operate, the final stage, just what the continuous delivery looks like, how to do the improvement cycles on your process, and yeah, but today iterate and launch. And so as we
go ahead, Luis.
No, you go ahead.
All right. So I just a quick comment there. I know we're coming in for a hard landing here because we can only cover so much in all these webinars, right? So we spent a lot of time preparing people for how to launch their vCISO program. And we're going to try and tie a bow on this in the next 2 weeks, right? Iterate and launch this week. So we've built this thing. Now we got to sell it. And then next time we get together, our final time is talking about service delivery and even maybe renewals if we get to that. So we realize that we're coming in for a quick landing here, but we're going to try and get you guys as much value as we can in the last 2 sessions here.
Yeah, you know, we were talking about community as we got started there, and I think one of the key pieces of this series is not, you know, to solve the entire problem of launching your vCISO thing, but in many ways just kind of remove a bit of the mysticism around getting started and what do I need to do, and just kind of feeling like it's a big mountain to climb. But also to offer Jesse's Power Grid community as a key place to really get the support and the help and the community around the getting the offer stood up and launched inside your MSP. So we'll talk more about, we'll have a link to Jesse's Power Grid later on, but definitely look that up if you're feeling like the support piece would be a great way to help you launch.
Yeah.
Now, as we've done with previous ones, let's maybe kickstart with a quick poll. And this first poll is this idea of like productization, product management, launching new offerings. Like, what's the process like in your MSP when you launch new offerings? And obviously, you know, options here to answer are limited, but please jump in. Let us know what it's like at your MSP when you launch new offerings. Might have a great process, could be a little bit better. Just curious to see how people are feeling.
I have a guess, but I'm not going to poison the well here. So we'll see if I'm right as to which option is going to be the highest.
Yeah. And you know, my thought on this to some extent is that over the last few years in particular, with how much security, cybersecurity endpoint solutions or other things, and now with AI, I think it's going to happen even more. There's going to be a clear need to like act like product managers to go figure out like what's the actual offering. And it's not just reselling some AI tool. It's actually like what's the service around it? How do we incorporate it into like onboarding and delivery and so on?
Yeah, I think you're going to see that we need actual functions like product managers in MSPs because of that exact point. Is there's so much, and we need to be very operationally efficient with how we go to market with new offers, because, you know, before we had to do maybe 1 or 2 a year. Now we might have to do 5, 6, 10 a year in bigger organizations. So we really, if we make a couple mistakes on offers along the way, that could really be detrimental to our growth trajectory.
All right, we've got 7 out of 11. Looks like we've already lost 4 people to password resets or printer tickets. Let's share these results here. And yeah.
There was my guess. So we were correct.
Yeah. So you thought basic steps outlined, kind of tribal knowledge or a
Yeah.
champion that kind of leads the thing. And yeah.
Yep. Yep. That's typical, right? It's a function of we only have so many cycles in the day. And so there's so many other process improvement things going on. Sometimes product management just, we know that there's somebody, a champion or a rock star that can get over the finish line. And so we're just going to rely on that because we just don't have the cycles, right, to put a process in place for it.
By the way, I'll mention that on that dynamic of finding the right people that can either galvanize or champion or really drive initiatives. I came across Patrick Lencioni's Working Genius framework.
Yeah.
Super simple test. There's basically 6 working geniuses. And while some people may be great at certain kind of technical work, they may not be ideal to like bring the team together and get this whole thing launched and kind of drive the cheerleading team behind some of these initiatives. So I thought it was a really great framework that I think is fairly price accessible. It's like 10 or 15 bucks per person, not like hundreds of dollars or anything like that. And I think for an MSP to understand who would actually like doing that kind of work, it would be great to do. So Patrick Lencioni's Working Genius. All right, so interesting poll for sure. We'll come back and do a couple other polls afterwards. But let's talk about training the team.
Yeah.
This cross-functional offer awareness so that everybody knows what's going to launch.
Yeah. Yeah. This is, you mentioned, is so important as we kind of like, let's think about all that we've talked about in the last 4 get-togethers. So 66.666% of our time has been spent talking about building this offer, right? So we have put a ton of resources as an MSP. If we've gone and done this, we've made a significant investment and taken on some significant risk. I talked about that offer launch process. So all of that can be lost in this stage if we don't train and disseminate and assimilate this new offer into the organization properly, right? So you could have the best offer in the world. And I've lived this 12 years ago when I built my first vCISO program, is I built it in a vacuum. And a lot of this portion of the system was learning what I did wrong. And I went to the sales team, hey, we got this great offer. You're going to sell it. We're going to make a lot of money. It's going to be great. It's going to be great for our clients. And it didn't go anywhere because everyone was like, huh? Right? So you have to really put the detail into, again, what we talked about previously in, session 1, in our last session, about creating these detailed client personas, ICPs, and value pillars that accompany our clients' pain points and goals and desires, right? So I think this is really important to understand, is that we have to communicate this well to the organization. I love the idea of like a suspension bridge. Like, so if there's 2 pillars and it suspends the bridge. So think of, you're on one side, your client is on the other, and the sale is over here somewhere, right? So if your value pillars don't line up with your client's desires and pain points, you're never going to make that cross across the bridge and actually make it. So having battle cards, right? Having meetings, having discussion points. And we're going to get into that more, but I'll get off my soapbox and let Louise chime in on this as well.
Well, this first item I think is super interesting because, like, how important have you seen it to be with the folks that join the Power Grid, for example, and are kind of realizing the importance of the internal pipeline of their own team, kind of identifying when a client is effectively raising their hand for some kind of vCISO service or things like that. So the interest signals and training teams, people, maybe your L1 help desk, that may hear something but not immediately connect the dots. So that kind of pipeline building, tell me a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so you need to have those training meetings, and that's part of our product management offer launch process, is setting up a cadence for not only training sales. Yes, we need to do that, and we're going to talk about that, but then talking to account management, your VCIOs, your TAMs, your engineers, your service manager, and the help desk to really like what you should, I think what you should do and what I like to see, right, depending on the level of organizational alignment we have on this, is I love to go in and do and pitch the different teams on it and then let them ask questions and have objections like a client would.
Right.
So not only are you going to get practice with your pitch and refine some things that maybe you didn't think about, you're also going to allow all of them to be part of it, to feel like they're helping build it, and to actually get their questions answered. So when they see something, they can actually say something. I'll just say, when we did our relaunch after the first mistake launch in 2015, when we built our relaunched our vCISO program, we did this correctly. And then I had before technical engineers who were actually upset with me because I was giving them more work, now coming to me because they understood where it fit and said, hey, these guys are asking for DLP. I think they might actually need a data governance project, or they might need to have a vCISO for this stuff. And now we're working as a team, and it's a completely different landscape. So yeah. I think it's so important to build those muscles in the organization.
The other thing I've heard, in the landscape of vCIO, and I think, we haven't talked enough about how critical that link between vCISO and vCIO. And, if you're a smaller team, that might be the same person right now. But as your team grows, these roles narrow a bit. And I hear stories of technical teams effectively undermining the work of the vCIO because in some cases, they just don't understand what the objective or the goal of the thing is. Right. And so they might, like a customer they might have on a call, and they might say like, oh, that sounds like overkill, like you don't need that. Meanwhile, it's like the number one thing that the business is trying to move an offer, into the market for. So I think it's important to get clarity. Clarity is a super key outcome here from the team, is that everybody understands what the offer is and why we want it in the first place.
Yeah, and we've talked about all that last week, right? All the process for this. But again, now you're getting into operationalizing this. And so you're going to find things, wrinkles that people didn't think about. So you may have had a talk with the vCIOs and they're like, yeah, sounds good. But now you go pitch them and say, we're going to say these things. And now they're all thinking in their client's mind, oh, my client's going to be thinking this. They're going to be thinking that. They're going to have this objection. Actually, I have this objection. This seems like overkill. And so you have to actually address those objections with those teams, because as we all know, when you make the best sales and the best push for the product is when everyone believes in it. And this is getting everyone to believe in it, right? So a vCIO specifically, I can remember exactly what you said, vCIO saying this seems like overkill. But when I sat down with them and said, okay, this is why we need to do this. And they say, oh, aha, light bulb goes on. Now I'm lockstep with you. This all makes sense. And there's no mom and dad fighting behind the scenes, and going out to the customer. So last piece on that is that I think you mentioned these might be the same person doing this, but I don't want to discount that same person, but it needs to be two distinct offers, because you need to be getting paid to do both of these things. It's not all cram it in and charge a little bit extra on the user. There needs to be distinct offers, outcomes, and client deliverables that, again, line up with those pain points that we talked about. And the services need to be something they either raise their hand and say, yes, we want, or no, we don't. So when the time comes and they realize that they did need it, now you can have that conversation. You've set those edges on the service very clearly, and you can stay profitable. That's the bottom line.
Totally. We talked so much about the project versus program mentality, in one of the early episodes. All right. So the right fit client, and I think this is another piece of interest signal, because the client may not say something, but in the course of the day-to-day support that your project teams, that your help desk, that any other interaction that you're having with clients have, identifying things that are clear markers that the client should be at least exploring some kind of vCISO offer is, I think, a key piece of, again, building that pipeline. It comes from multiple angles. What have you seen in your experience working with folks in the Power Grid on this, the right fit client for the offer?
Yeah, there's two things. I think a lot of MSPs stop at the need, like they need this. Okay. But you also have to understand, do they value this? Whether they need it, whether they value it or not is really the second piece to that. So there's things you can listen for to, do they need it and do they value it? And this is why I think you go back to session two, maybe it was session one, when we did our client segmentation exercise, right? So when we do these client segmentations, we're thinking through what type of clients value our current services and why do they value them? And what do they think about cybersecurity? And we're picking those right fit clients. Then if we remember, we mined those things out into our ICP and created it's more of a theory or an aspirational goal. Now we need to go start talking to clients. So what makes them right fit for the offer? I think this is part of that iterate, right, and launch piece. Is now we have all these things we think, and we've done the research, we've done the homework, so we don't see them uneducated going to our clients. Now we need to go talk to 2, 3, 4 of our best clients that we have really good relationships with and be like, hey, lay this out. Here's what we think. Here's what we think your pain points are. Here's how we meet those. And here's the service we're offering to do this. What do you think about this? So if you've got a fan that can be a part of this with you, you're getting that actual client feedback is going to be drastically important. From the power grid, something that's top of mind last week, had one of our folks come in and say, hey, I took away your ICP interview questions and all this. And I sat down to lunch with one of my clients and just asked them all these questions, right? They're already a client. They're actually already using our services, but I wanted to ask them what they thought about this. This wasn't a sale. This was just doing market research. And they said a couple of things they told me I wasn't even thinking about. I hadn't even considered, but now we've aligned our packages to meet those and say why this is important because it answers these needs. And so that's a huge unlock, by the way, right? So now if you can put that in a battle card and have your salespeople and your account managers listening for that and having your SDRs using that in talking points, you just drastically increased your percentage of win rates and your cost for lead acquisition at that point.
Yeah, the sales and account management piece also, they feel very similar to the need to be boastful of your like vCIO process, even in the sales process. I feel like a lot of MSPs never talk about what is it like to work with us in day to day after the sale is done. Because as teams build out their turnkey sales org or people there, they kind of, left hand's not tied to the right hand in so many cases. And I feel like vCISO is a lot of the same thing. Like these things need to have their seeds planted super early in the conversation. The other thing I'll say, and maybe your opinion on this would be great, but I seem to get a lot of feedback when I talk about just the narrative of compliance versus the narrative of risk. And so like when you ask the question, do they value it? Are you like putting it in the wrong terms or just the wrong light for a customer to care, right? If they have a governance requirement, it's one story, but sometimes they don't. And so if you come in heavy with compliance, they may not care at all.
I am highly opinionated on this. Some would say dogmatic.
Surprise, surprise.
So I think actually leading with compliance as a service for a go-to-market is the wrong approach. I think it's going to actually, like you mentioned, it's going to attract wrong fit clients in a lot of scenarios, because if you say we help you get compliance, now you've just commoditized yourself. Okay, I need to get compliance. I'm going to pay you this money and you're going to get me compliant. Where you've already started the relationship off incorrectly at that point. Like you mentioned, it's a program, not a project. So then you're going to go say, okay, I need X, Y, and Z from you. Your team needs to do this. I'm your guy. And they're going to be like, well, no, I'm paying you to get my compliance, that you do this all. Well, I can't. And then all of a sudden you're in a very adversarial relationship with the client. Whereas if your go-to-market and your positioning is talking about business risk, with compliance as one of those risks, definitely not all of them. It's a big one in many industries. Now you're saying, I'm helping you create a risk lowered trajectory that guarantees business momentum for you. So yes, we're going to help you handle compliance. You've got to be involved in that. We're going to have a security steering committee that you've got to be involved with, and we're going to make decisions about what's best for the business based on the numbers and all those things. Completely different conversation at that point. And by the way, if you're listening for clients to talk about those things, governance, risk, business trajectory, they get those types of things. They're not looking for a commodity checkbox for compliance, right?
Yeah. I knew it. I knew you'd have an opinion.
As you can tell, I'm like, I've thought that through 1 or 2 times.
Yeah. We kind of mentioned all the other roles as we kind of unpack that a little bit, but this role mapping exercise or the capability map that we talked about back in session 3 is a super powerful exercise to just have in your wheelhouse, not just for something like vCISO, but even you know, at ScalePad, we've been talking about customer success a bunch, and
Yes.
customer success is not a job you're going to hand with one person. It's kind of this organizational motion to some extent. And you got to understand like who are feeders into the process, into the motion, who helps, you know, provide data for the QBR, who helps talk about the story of the projects you just delivered, project teams, obviously. So like it's never one person's job. And I think this capability map is a really great way to understand who you can actually give some proper accountability to
Yep.
support the process once you launch, and not just have it be sort of somebody doing favors for another team type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And accounting for those and accounting for that spend too. I mean, something let's talk about like a tactical outer working of this is we say, okay, we're going to offer vulnerability management. Well, vCISO is going to help choose strategic risk for that. But then you have who's going to actually deliver the patching and the out of cycle patch management and all the other things to actually shrink and close those vulnerabilities. Have we accounted for that in our security operations pricing and that packaging, right? Because now we're overlapped. And now if you haven't accounted for that, you either have to do one of two things. You have to eat that cost, or you have to have one of the departments operate below your desired margins. And now all of a sudden that's affecting them and their people and their morale. And, you know, you're not going to be friends if you do that, right? So it's important to think all these things through. And we talked about theoretical. Now, when we start gaming this out and actually doing it and talking about it, this is the time that we need to be collaborative and the time we need to be strategic and actually, you know, do dry runs of this stuff.
Let me ask you maybe, this is such an abstract and maybe tricky question, but how much do you find maybe the old mindset of like VAR type pricing holds MSPs back as they're thinking about what is the value a client is getting and thinking about how they reprice their engagements and their offerings?
Yeah.
Because it feels like there's still a lot of like pressure to do this like per device or per user thing. And the client doesn't understand how much, you know, the dynamic has changed. And so we get stuck right in that translation area,
Mm-hmm.
this pricing shift, this value shift overall. And so, you know, where do people get stuck there and how do you help them overcome it?
Yeah. So this comes from actually the first MSP I worked at was a VAR and transitioned to an MSP. So I'm actually pretty familiar with kind of what that looks like, right? And some of the baggage that comes along with that. But I think at the end of the day is VAR relationship much of the time. Now this can change in enterprise type of engagements, but much of the time it's very transactional, right? Here's a menu. You order the things you want off the menu and I'll deliver those things in a clean package and it's very law driven. That's the way you could think about it, is that like I can remember writing we did so much work on emails to say, okay, if you do this, it will be 2 hours more. And if you do that, it will be 3 hours more. And like these long email approval type things from the VAR side of things. So when you go to the MSP but you're not a trusted advisor, right? You're just somebody that they're picking off of the menu and that almost faceless in a lot of ways, right? When we go to a trusted advisor model, now we have to account for outcomes. So yes, there's still a menu, right? But it's more of we have to price it in a way that we can sit down and take our time and be strategic with the client. And so that is going to create some sticker shock in a lot of scenarios. And how do we overcome that? With the right positioning, with the right business outcomes, and the right value-based, again, clients' pains and desires, and what are those worth, and what is our service worth? If you do it right, typically it's a fraction of what that means for the business, but it's got to be positioned properly. So I think the struggles and the mistakes are not doing enough research and not being precise enough on the go-to-market, and then packaging that in to understand your client's mind and package that into easy, digestible, larger chunks that they can bite off.
Yeah. All right. I appreciate that little tangent. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a recurring theme, you know, and it's not just vCISO. It's also just moving from old pricing models to like even a more comprehensive customer success motion where you spend more time doing just even vCIO things. Like this wasn't accounted for in our pricing models 10 years ago. And so now we're kind of in this place where it's like, shit, we got to charge more to make it worthwhile to spend all this time with customers, which really wasn't needed 10 years ago. So all we were doing was VAR stuff, like install infrastructure and, you know, go.
Yeah, and by the way, if you try to fit this into a per user pricing model, it's just not going to work. You're either going to drastically overcharge and price yourself out of certain clients that are larger, and then you're going to underprice and be under margins with smaller clients. So you really have to break these things out, I think, and include them as like a separate service that you're including with on top of your user count, right?
So also in session 4, and I shared the link in the chat to the previous session of resources. In session 4, we talked about a bunch of the previous processes that were kind of important to make sure you had down pat. There's a good list of those in the resources and stuff like that. So all right, so let's talk about offer readiness and this idea of smoke testing, you know, the presentation layer. I think this is where the feedback loop also starts. Like you have to start gathering early feedback at this stage and not wait until like you're kind of really committed to a process. But yeah, talk through this a little bit.
Yeah, so there's a couple things happening in parallel here, right? So don't look at the last slide like we got to do this, now we got to do this, right? So these things are all kind of happening at the same time, and you'll have to, you know, project plan this out as you go through it. Now, we talked about pitching to the different teams. I think before that, the people doing the pitches have to get comfortable with the pitches. So you should be doing mock presentations, whether, you know, it's probably going to be your practice leader at first, maybe your vCISO lead. And if not, it's going to be somebody who's technically aligned, maybe a vCIO, identify your internal champion, who that's going to be, right? And they're going to build this pitch and work on this pitch and then deliver it to your sales and account management teams. And that's kind of like a smaller circle where we're going to huddle and say, what do we think about this? What are your objections? What do you understand? What don't you understand? What would be helpful for you? Here's a battle card, right? What do you think about this? So I have this question, you know, it'd be helpful. So doing all those things in that kind of smaller circle and then identifying your internal champions. And then once you've got that down, then you're going to present to those other teams, right? You're getting some more feedback. And now you've kind of got what you think you're going to go to market with. And you go to a couple clients and then you get that feedback like we talked about. Then we kind of have an idea of what does a pitch look like. We should do some sort of, you know, internal certification. Now, again, don't over-engineer this, right? We're iterating here. So these are all gradual steps. You're going to be somewhere in your maturity level of how good or not good your processes are here. So don't get bogged down like we have to get this perfect process. So presentation certification could mean that you pitch it to your manager and you pitch it to a client, and that's you're certified at that point. Once you get further down the road and have better feedback, now you can say you're able to overcome 1, 2, 3 objections, so on and so forth, right? We talked about leveraging one of your clients to help you test and validate. And
how scary is that, by the way, for the average MSP to literally go put it out there kind of in testing mode with a client, or even asking them to be part of like this kind of like gray area thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that can be very worrisome. And this is why I say, if you go back, I think, I don't know if we talked about this or not. We may not have. There's a matrix that I use to, when you go through your client segmentation exercise, that you want to identify your fans, quote unquote, right? And so you want to have 1 or 2 clients that just really the relationship's great and everything, but I also wouldn't have it be a super like high value or high revenue client because I do not want to poison the well with somebody that's 20% of my annual revenue, right? I'd like somebody who's less than 5% that is just loves us and is going to give us great feedback, you know, and say, okay, just tell us what you think about this, right? Now you have to, you know, we're going back to ICP. You also have to understand that they may not have the same pain points as your larger clients that you actually want to go after. So you have to be careful there. But I think that along with then just having lunch with people that maybe aren't even your clients, you have a network, you have peers saying, hey, who do you know that I could ask these questions to that's in this thing? And you could go actually then say, hey, we actually don't want to pitch you. We just want to talk with us about you and get your feedback, right? So it's just a conversation. But
that feedback, yeah, and that feedback piece, I feel like when we were prepping these slides, it doesn't really communicate how important it is to like really open up your ears to capture all the feedback, so you can go take it apart and really understand what is the feedback that you're getting. Those feedback retros effectively are going to be so important in the early stages, because if you wait like a couple of weeks, it's going to be very easy to forget what feedback you got in the first place. So I think you need a
Yes.
very, very quick, continuous loop of that feedback retro in the early days to make sure you're kind of cataloging all the questions, all the objections, all the things that you get back, so you can build more clarity into the decks and the presentation process.
Yeah,
Obviously.
and this is way beyond the scope of what we can get into today, right? But like taking like almost an agile approach to that, and understanding that we want to get quick feedback and fail fast, meaning like you said, if we get that feedback, let's catalog it. How can we use it? Do a stand up, right? And say, what does this mean? Can we use this? Yes, no. Okay, let's try this. And then just keep going in that way. So I think, people should look into that if they're not already.
By the way, I saw some article the other day that Agile is dead. It's all waterfall going forward.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
AI
so waterfall. I do love these. Now, I do. Okay, so we're going to go on a rabbit hole here, but I do understand what they mean by that, because Agile has been so rigid and people were doing Agile just for Agile's sake. So we built up this complete infrastructure of like Agile Scrum Master, and they have to run the Scrum. And so the thing that it was designed to do was be flexible. It's become not that. So we're doing Agile for Agile's sake. So yes, I do agree with that perspective, but whatever you call it, you need to create those quick feedback loops and action them.
Yes, cool. Once again, Jesse for the win on that one. We talked briefly also about this like client right fit identification, like getting to the actual nitty gritty of making that selection. Back in session one, we had a spreadsheet that kind of helped you think about the right places and right things to start identifying clients. And you want to start small. Again, standardization often plays the enemy role here, in that MSPs kind of launch this thing and suddenly they want to go do it for everybody, right? And that's probably the wrong approach.
Yeah.
The client readiness, service budget, and their needs. I think you always have to be testing the waters for those three things across any offering. This is part of like any segmentation exercise helps you achieve, and just asking yourselves a little bit more rigorously some of the questions around, that readiness for it. And I think we had there was kind of like a readiness assessment that you do with your clients to kind of pick those top candidates for this. And then ultimately not forgetting that you gotta put this into the motion of the regular QBR cadence, make sure it's coming up in conversations, and that those two people, if there are separate roles, vCIO and vCISO, that they're constantly talking about how to deliver this in tandem to clients, right?
Yeah, so this is really important now when we talk about moving from theoretical to action. So we could have done our segmentation exercise and say, hey, these are the 5 clients we want to talk to. Now we're 2 months down the road, right? We've built it out. We're ready to talk to them. We need to go do that sanity check. The vCIO says, oh, actually, you don't want to talk to them. Now we just botched this project or something like that. Okay, well, or we're going to do it. We want to make it a QBR review cycle thing. Well, their next QBR just happened. It's not going to be for another 3 months. Okay, so they're out. So we just need to do a sanity check and understand, again, that's that constant feedback perspective of understanding, here's who we plan to talk to. Should we talk to them? Is everyone on board? We're aligned. Now, we will get better and faster at this and have to do less of these touch points as we build the program. But as we get started, we want to really keep the training wheels on and make sure that we over communicate internally, because we have the potential to really cause discord if we don't. So I think just extra care while we go through these is very important, right? So again, aligning the existing QBR motion, I think, is great. Then going back to that other example, we just did the QBR, but you know what? They did mention security. So I think they'd be open to another conversation. I'm going to reach back out, right? These are the kinds of things you need to stack up and talk about as you get ready to go.
Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of bifurcate a bit of the creating the awareness and starting to drive interest signals versus actually going to pitch them the offering, right? And so this is why I think this next poll is super interesting. How long does it take you to talk to all your clients about a new service or offering? Let me launch this guy here. I'm super curious to see the feedback. Folks, if you're distracted off on the side on another screen, come back, answer our poll. We want to know.
You just got to shout ransomware, and then everyone pays attention.
Yeah.
Ransomware.
We need to breach your attention. So I think this is interesting, right? Because we're saying, go select a handful of clients. Don't talk to everybody about it just yet. But at the same time, you have to be prepared to deliver a conversation talk
Yeah.
track to all your clients over the next little while so that you're building this awareness and your pipeline and not just kind of hit a brick wall of customers interested in doing this. All right, we almost have 76% of answers. Let's go and have a look at results here.
Okay. I expected that. Most people said we only talk to clients we think are a good fit. So I would say, and not to assume what everyone's doing, because we're not talking directly, but have we done all this segmentation and gone and figured out what the clients are? And if we didn't, most of you said we didn't have a process. If we didn't have a process to identify right fit clients, how do we know what clients really are a good fit? So this speaks to what I typically see is like these half-done offers. And this happens a lot with vCISOs. Like a couple clients need it, so we kind of put something together and then like, oh yeah, we'll offer it. And then kind of like the heat dies down and then we go on and do something else. So there's this like half-baked thing going on, meaning we've just created operational debt in the MSP because we didn't have a full picture of what looks like done and actually talk to all the clients that we think in our MSP are a good fit, or potentially all our clients, at least let them know that it's there, which I think is important for vCISO and risk. And then we kind of create this ambiguity and we're right back where we started, with more expense, with bad margins, with operational debt.
Can I bring back a bit of this VAR mindset thing that I think this has been maybe the process plaguing a lot of these startups of new offers, is that I think we got used to very strongly just waiting for a client to raise their hand and say, hey, I think we need this.
Yeah.
And then at that point, the MSP goes and makes the investment into the thing or whatever it was, just to get it out the door. And that obviously contributes A, to the half-baked offer, but also B, to not really thinking cross-functionally about the needs of that offer and doing the thing more comprehensively. So it's important to kind of catch yourself when you're thinking about this and wondering, oh yeah, we'll just wait to see if any client shows interest before we spend any time on this. It might be the totally reverse way of thinking about it.
Right. And I will say, like, I think this conversation is so important because whether you talk vCISO or not, I'm a big proponent of, and we teach a motion for this whole, kind of tributary, but how to go out and get a risk assessment to every single client and talk through them. And right, I'll tout Control Map giving the free assessment as part of their, free client prospecting assessment as part of your platform right now. So you can go do this for every client. And I will just say some clients will surprise you, because when you hold a mirror up and you show them where their risk is and you properly say, here's what our IT services reduce. So we are reducing risk, aren't you doing that for us already conversation, but there is a delta here. And this is what the delta is. Here's what the outcomes are. Here's what potential even financial risk is. People will look at that and say, well, I can't hide from that anymore. I know it's there. Or they might say, I didn't even know that was there. I just assumed it was fine. So you've level set, and you'll have people now raising their hand for vCISO and risk management and even other cyber services that you thought, oh no, they wouldn't be a good fit. Right. So I think it's important to go through this methodically.
I find in general that the thinking or the thought process around risk or risk registers tends to kind of be thought of exclusively as a GRC thing or as a compliance thing. Right. But it kind of fits even at the QBR conversation, even with a senior level tech that's doing, maybe some kind of VCIO like or account management like functions, is to have a good visible way of talking about risk and things that are identified that are not necessarily, initiatives that are MSP driven, but rather just, things the client has kind of argued that they're not interested in that create risk, or this new project that you just delivered a VM into the Hyper-V infrastructure last weekend, maybe create some new dependencies, some new risks. Like identifying all these things and having them front and center, I think runs in parallel to the whole vCISO thing, because clients would absolutely want to mitigate risk. And I think so. My point being simply like a simple risk register, even in QBRs, can be really powerful to create awareness.
Yeah. And then when you get into the point where I've seen this, where they didn't even have a corporate risk register, and you're saying, hey, you know what, you guys should start thinking about doing this for more than just cyber, should look at it from a business perspective. Yeah. Now you've helped them actually get better at business. So it's a pretty powerful thing.
Totally. Well, and even the MSP can be thinking about the business level risks that exist because of technology. And that's, I
Right.
think, the opportunity to bridge a bit of that outcome level thinking with the technology level thinking, which is often, thought about as different things.
Yep.
So the goal setting, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, the time-bound execution plans, like not just letting these things kind of linger forever, but there's probably an opinion or a pet peeve or two in there from Jesse. Let's hear from you on this.
So yeah, I'm a big fan of OKRs, right? The OKR structure for goal setting. And so I think that works well, and especially something like this, right? So creating an execution plan that says, hey, we want to, and a scientific method, let's test our theory. Okay, we want to talk to all of our clients about vCISO. Oh, thank you for putting that in there. Objectives and key results. And sometimes I'll fire those off without talking about them. So thanks for dropping that in, Luis. But let's say, okay, we want to make a high-level organizational statement. We want to talk to all of our clients about doing a risk assessment and positioning for vCISO in a year. Okay, is that doable? Well, let's talk about meeting cadences, who we're talking to and when. We got to do this segmentation worksheet. We got to define the milestones. We got to figure out, does this all line up? So let's say we do this and we talk to the team and we say, oh, actually, no, it's going to take a year and a half to talk to every client. Okay, well, let's now begin to subdivide those in that agile methodology and creating smaller chunks, smaller bites. Okay, that first segment of clients, when can we talk to the first 5? Okay, we can talk to them this week. Then individuals have roll-up goals for that, saying, okay, I'm going to go talk to my client that's in that first 5 by next week and set the stage. And so we create this whole plan and everybody's working together in symphony to get this goal done. And now we have a date for when it's done. We can track progress, we can track results, we can measure ourselves. And by the way, when this is done, it's done and the operational debt is gone, right?
Yeah. I'll say that just tangentially, a lot of MSPs operate on EOS, and EOS, the concept of rocks tends to be a little bit too large, and OKRs are a great complement, I'd say, to rocks to get a little bit more specific, get a little bit more metrics driven in some of these, smaller initiatives or projects or things like this or programs, to get some real clarity around the things you want to achieve. Like you might have a rock that's like, talk to all clients about vCISO, but the OKR might be like, we're going to talk to 5 clients about vCISO in the first, quarter. So it just helps you get a little bit more nuanced. Those deployment rings are a super interesting piece of this thinking, is to take it into like steps and just kind of expand a bit on that deployment process, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's talk through this, because I think we mentioned this or we've alluded to it, but I want to kind of anchor this with everybody. This, I think, is the way you should be thinking about it, right? So your 5 fans, it could be 3 fans, it could be 1. I hope it's more than 1, but you want to talk to those first, right? And those are the ones that we can go quickly and actually can't be, we were not going to be perfect, right? But we can let them know and say, hey, we're going to ask you to work with us, help us shape the offer, so on and so forth, right? Those are, again, not high risk accounts, even if they are fans. I would put those in the beta ring. So now we have high profile accounts. We've gotten our feet underneath us. We've gotten feedback. We've gotten our process down a little bit. Now we can go talk to higher profile customers that have maybe been asking us about compliance or governance or those things. Say, hey, now we've got an answer for you. Or we see that you need these things and we have something we want to talk to you about, right? Mm-hmm. We deliver to those. And that's really where you're going to see a lot of your ICPs start to develop in terms of aspirational versus actual. So you're going to get a bunch of feedback there. Now you can go talk to everybody else. You've got your process down. You understand your pain points. You understand typically what clients are going to say when they raise their hand, or what objections they're going to have when you go talk to existing ones. So you're going to go deliver those. And basically whatever's left out of those 2 buckets is your GA. As you do that, then your sales team, your marketing team, everybody is starting to understand the value prop and really how to talk about this. We can start pressing into new prospects at that time. Again, this isn't a perfect world, right? We all know that somebody might come in, like you might have a hot lead come in while you're doing your alpha, and you just got to deal with it. But how we mitigate that risk, because as you mentioned, Luis, we have risk doing this ourselves, business risk, is all these systems we have in place so we can work through that and kind of handle that in parallel as it comes through. So again, think of that perfect world aspirational goal, and understand obviously that things are messy, and we're at some level going to have to build the train as we go down the tracks.
Good stuff. All right, time for the last poll, and we only have a few more slides here as we get close to wrap up. But how structured is your approach to setting up feedback loops for new offerings? And we're kind of building on the demise of a process here, it feels like, because the second poll, we already knew that the first poll, only a few people were really structured and really process driven around new offerings. And so I suspect the feedback loop is maybe something that's a bit ad hoc to some extent, but let's launch this poll here and get some feedback from you guys. I think the feedback loop is so important. I talk to vCIOs all the time, and we make so many assumptions, and they kind of admit to the guilt of just assuming the client is thinking this or the other thing and not really asking their opinion. How can we make this process or this meeting more valuable to you, this kind of thing. And so I think those feedback loops are important at all levels of that customer relationship, but especially in the launch of a new offering, man, you just cannot ignore.
Yeah. I mean, it's really the difference between success and failure. And if you think of like the offering as an investment, which is really what it is, right? The more you can, it's compounding. So the more value you can put in and make sure that you don't have go backs at the outset, 5 years from now, the more valuable, and the exponential curve is going to be steeper for that offer, right?
Yeah. Can I get 2 more poll answers? Come on, guys. Please jump in there. Give us 2 more answers so we can get up to 75% response here.
You can do it. Yeah.
All right, let's end the poll. Here's the results.
Ad hoc feedback. Yeah, that's pretty typical, right? I think tracks with what we were seeing from the other responses, as you mentioned, Luis.
Yeah, and there's layers to this, right? The client is giving the feedback in the QBR or in the vCISO conversation, and you got to have a process to bring this back to the team in a constructive way.
I do like that we saw 2 people say they have structured and external feedback at key milestones. I mean, I think that's pretty good if you're doing that, right? You're getting there.
Yeah, and this is easy to build into SOWs. Just require a status meeting at certain key milestones with the client. It's just part of the thing they have to agree to do throughout the process.
Right.
Like, to think that you can go along and not expect any feedback from them on the process, it's just absolute crazy.
And I think that last option, the continuous feedback, is we're kind of alluding to what we're going to talk about in our final session, is that continuous program monitoring and risk monitoring feedback loop.
Yeah,
so
indeed.
That's a little takeaway. You got to come back.
Come back for session 6. Yeah, so this internal piece of the feedback loop, talk to this a little bit, Jesse. I know there's obviously different ways to think about internal feedback loops, but
yes. So again, let's frame this in terms of program launch, right? So we've done all our cert, or all our sales certs or whatever. We're actually going out and talking to clients now. Again, in the beginning, we want a lot of communication. So I think having office hours with the vCISO or the practice lead, the person who's built this program, is going to be delivering it, as well as the sales team, for the sales team and account management teams to come back in and say, okay, we went and talked to these clients, and this is what they're saying. This is what we ran into. We kind of created, we didn't have an answer for this. Okay, let's game plan this. So like recurring office hours as you launch and as you start doing this stuff for the sales and account management teams to come. And by the way, I think they should be open for technical teams too, because if like you have a technical account manager who's really good with clients, I know we all have those, they might want to listen in and understand, right? So again, make them recordings and make them available, put them into your training. There's all sorts of things you could do with that, repurpose that content for knowledge transfer.
I'll say often, like, office hours are interesting, right, too, because even with small teams, sometimes office hours are just what you're already doing all day long, because everybody is kind of in this, close-knit situation.
Right.
But I think dedicating the time to that specific thinking process and trying to garner feedback on those specific issues is still powerful. And so, like, having an open Teams call, an open Zoom call, or whatever, people can jump in to talk about that specific topic, can be so powerful. We see that even with our office hours that we do for Control Map. People jump in, they have a specific issue they want to talk about, they come in and ask that question. So I think it's good to make time for those specific, feedback loops.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and then external loops, we talked about this a little bit, but building in those cadences as you're doing this. So I talked that this is where that bullet point came from. I kind of jumped the gun on that earlier about going and talking to clients and just saying, hey, here's what we're doing. What do you think about this? Would you want anything else? Would you want us to not talk to you about certain things? What would you expect from a vCISO? And here's what a vCISO is, cybersecurity strategy. What would you want them to help you with? And they're going to tell you, again, if it's not a sales conversation, it's a good relationship. They're just going to give you, what's top of mind for them. And so that's great material that you can use. But then also, obviously, then when you're talking with the clients in touch points, it's like we've just done the risk assessment. We just presented to the team. Let's talk to our champion and say, how do you think that went? What was the conversation like? How do you think that's going to help you? Is that going to help you? Is that going to hurt you? And then obviously, Luis, you guys at ScalePad are so good about talking about all of this, but, talking to your client and saying, was that valuable? Did this help? Before you get out of the meeting, and then capturing and repurposing those answers that you get.
Yeah, absolutely. So valuable here. And it's funny because sometimes these bullet points seem so simple at first, but it's like, we know it's all in the execution.
Yeah, there's a lot there. And I think this is when you get to a point, it depends so much on what you've built that you have to design now your feedback loops to go with it. And this is, again, hopefully I've earned the right to say this, but this is, again, why in the power grid where we see people really get help, because they're able to come and workshop all these things of like, I'm doing it specifically this way. How would you approach this? Right.
Yeah. I think also, like it happens in development cycles, sometimes you need early wins to get momentum, to field progress, to not wait until like this big thing that kind of has this big milestone to get on the other side of that. And so identifying some early indicators of wins, I think, is also great to celebrate throughout the process. Talk to me a little bit through, the reality of this in practice with some of the folks launching their programs in the power grid.
Yeah, I think you should then create some KPIs, maybe is what we can call them here. Although that might be a little loose terminology, but like, let's measure when we launched, because we want to have that date that we're launched to the time we got our first business relevant win, meaning we sold a contract, we helped the client make a decision around risk, we did those first 5 risk assessments and people paid for them. Those are all things we should talk about and say, hey, that was really good, or it took too long. We feel that it took too long, and why do we think that happened? So then we adjust. So those are metric driven things that we can start talking about. Stakeholder engagement. Is everyone showing up for the meetings, and are they participating? Guys, we all have, I think, AI note takers now. So you can measure how much people are talking and if they're actually involved or not. So start doing that, right? There's all sorts of breakdowns you can use for that. And then obviously, are people getting back to you, right? Are you waiting weeks, hours? Again, just a recent conversation I had with somebody in the grid is they're like, hey, this client, they never get back to me. They never do what I ask. They're and I'm like, well, let's talk about your ICP. And this was an existing client. Said, okay, well, they don't fit what your ICP really is. So I think you have to understand that they are not going to be as involved, and they're not your ideal client. So it's great that we had them sign up, but you have to realize that they're going to move slower, and they're probably not going to value the service as much as the next person. And we want to start to now position ourselves to get more clients that are saying, yeah, this is exactly what we want, and things work like clockwork, but you need to understand that and measure it. And then the sentiment thing goes back to the AI note takers, but we also want to ask those questions. Was this helpful? Having like a 4 rating scale, so they can't pick in the middle. They have to be on one side of good or bad. You can just ask them that question, right?
The other thing I'll say is meetings have this incredible power for the agenda to be the tone setting component of like what you get in the future. And just like we're supposed to ask for the sale, I think meeting agendas can set the expectation that you're asking for the decision, even if it's not, a monetary decision. It's like, hey, we need to be able to do this thing to mitigate this risk. And it might be just an internal continuous delivery, improvement of things. But getting the customer accustomed to actually making decisions or expecting a decision will be made at the next meeting is so, so powerful. And I think the agendas are a big part of how you drive that, for sure.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little more, actually, but I have a little acronym again that I like to refer to. That is, you need an RCT framework for anything you talk about. And that's a resource committed to a time. of completion. So when I talk about something with a client, I say, okay, who's going to do this? Let's make it clear. Like, not we need to do this, the royal we. Okay, this needs to happen. We've decided that it needs to happen to reduce risk. What are the things we need to do? Well, I need to go talk to my team and get a quote for X thing. You need to go talk to your team and make sure that you can provide whatever resources are available and that make a decision on it by X date, right? And that's all, these are all time bound. So when we come to the next meeting, everyone's accountable. And if they haven't done it, it's going to be documented and go to the next meeting. So what does that do? Well, it keeps you honest. It keeps you doing what you say you're doing, because it's going to be right there staring at everyone in the face. But also clients that are dragging their feet, if you start showing up to meetings and there's 2-3 bullets saying, you know, Joe didn't do this, said he didn't have time. Joe didn't do this, said he didn't have time. Joe didn't do this. Like, they got to look at that too. And that, like, again, this is a tacit way to say, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
So I think that's super important.
I think also the prep helps you get your own stuff in order, because you know you're going to come expect a decision, but you have to also get your stuff together as a result.
Yeah.
Jesse, great session today, man. We have session 6 coming up in a few weeks. In the meantime, you did mention, thank you for dropping that node control map, did launch a couple new plans, including a free edition that allows you to do some assessments at no cost for some of those prospects, or there's up to 10 frameworks included in the free edition, things like HIPAA, PCI, CIS, and so on. So it's a great place to start and get your feet wet with the platform, and see if it's something you want to use, obviously, as you do more. But I can't stress enough how powerful it can be to have a community around you as you get this ideated, built, launched, and iterated over time. And so that's Jesse's Power Grid. Check out Jesse's Power Grid if you feel like that support system would be a powerful thing to do. And please come join us for session 6. It'll be the final session of this series. We've been doing this now for a year. I can't believe, like, we talked about, hey, should we do a little series? We were talking about this last year, and here we are sort of at 5 of 6 sessions, and lots of great information delivered, lots of great stuff. So we'll do that on December 4th at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 Eastern. Same link to register. All the sessions were there. And we'll close off this series. And we have all the series recordings posted on our YouTube channel. At ScalePad is our YouTube handle there. And that link that I shared earlier, I'll drop it again in the chat, has the links to any of the previous resources that we've talked about. So here's both links. One is the resources from previous sessions. The other one is the registration link for session 6. Jesse, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it so much. Folks did not ask many questions today, but you were just dropping so much good stuff. I can imagine their hands are cramping from all the notes they're taking. So.
It's been great. As always, I love getting together with you, man. So looking forward to the next one. We'll see y'all then.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us.